before we get started, just to say, this is mostly for informational purposes only. If anything hurts, please stop. There are other sensations that might be felt. Really, if something feels like it's pain, please stop. If something feels like something is just stretching and it feels okay, you know, safety is the most important thing. And if you have any questions about whether it is safe to do something, please do talk to your doctor. So, you know, one of the most important things in aging and really movement is that we're moving in an aligned way. So just a little bit about me. I've been doing massage for over 20 years. In the time period that I became a massage therapist, people were mostly tight and they had some repetitive movement, and massage really fixed a lot of their issues that they came in with. Since the 20 years, people's main issues were that they were sitting too much, or that they had regular devices, or their job became even more repetitive. You know, the carpenters used to be general carpenters, and then they got to be very specific for framing. But the biggest issue that people had was significantly that we got phones and computers, and not even just we got laptops. And so a lot of things changed with how we were using our body. And so what I found is, even though people loved coming in for massage, a lot of what really corrected the discomfort they had that they came into was really fixing what they did the rest of the time when they weren't there with the massage. It was really correcting how they were sitting at their computer, or correcting how they were walking. Gait and walking was brought up that it was an important thing to work on. It is definitely something that I look at with my clients. But gait is actually a very complex thing. Babies learn how to walk, and then everything that we do the rest of our life, it can either become a little bit dysfunctional, which would mean that we got a little injury, or something hurt, or we were holding babies up on our hip or something, and we adjusted how we walked, and perhaps we didn't sort of fix it. In the ideal world, if we can move more ideally, that is going to be better for us, because we walk, you know, we take thousands of steps. We take thousands of steps a day. And so ideally, we're going to do them as upright as possible. So in the first class, I broke down all the different pieces. In this second class, I'm putting it all together, and then I will answer any of the questions that I can. But please understand, I am still a student of Gait. Gait is incredibly complicated to change, because you learned how to do it when you were very little, and you have, you know, continued to do it throughout the time. So putting it all together. Gait, especially running, is an element. Could Amy, would you be able to put people on mute unless they have a question?
Yeah.
Awesome. Only I'm just a little, okay, excellent. All right. So first of all, any questions quickly that we had from the first class? In the PDF that you guys, well, actually it's not a PDF, it's a Word document. There's lots of links to everything that we had done, plus the video would have been recorded before. All right, so we'll go over questions later. We're going to start with the different elements. So the different elements are going to be standing on one leg, which is a little bit more about running. Because typically with walking, we always have one element of on the ground at a time. In running, we don't. We'll have one upright. Then we're going to have the sequence of gait for the lower body, the sequence of gait for the upper body, and adding balance elements in with safety first, and then adding uneven weight in the upper body, okay? So standing it all together, as we've talked about with some of our other classes, when we're talking about balance, okay, we're going to really look to make sure that we're balancing on the bottom of the foot in 3 different spots, okay? Because depending on how we balance on the bottom of the foot, we're going to have, that's going to transfer up to our center of gravity in our pelvis. So when I talk about a tripod of the foot, okay, there's going to be the bottom of the foot right here. There's going to be the ball of the foot here. And then we're going to have the ball of the foot there, okay? And then our toes are supposed to be able to move and be flexible. So when I talk about the tripod of the foot, okay, I'm talking about those 3 spots. We want to make sure that we're able to feel into those 3 spots, okay? So, Jesus, come into that locked up place in our hearts and our minds. All right, Amy, are you able to mute everyone else? Peace be with you. Not more anxiety be with you, or stress. Peace, my peace be with you. So when we're talking about standing on one leg, we're going to mostly be talking about a single leg stance, okay? Now this can be complicated. This is not necessarily what everyone needs to do, okay? And if balance is anything a problem, always have something nearby that you can use, okay? So this is the leg I'm going to stand on. Okay, we're going to have that tripod of the foot, which are those 3 spots, and I'm going to feel in. Now notice, if I was more on just the 2 outside, can you see how my foot rolls in like this? And I'm more engaging this side. If my foot comes across, it's a little bit more that, Holy Spirit, cast out those doubts like you did in Thomas. I am. You can see I'm pronating in. If I was just on the 2 inside ones, I'm pronating in. So I really want to lift my toes, allow them in. I'm feeling those 3 spots. Okay. And
can we please ask whoever has their TV on to mute?
Okay. So stop judging. Love more. Forgive. I don't know if I am the host. Amy, are you on right now? Be generous. Don't be afraid. All these things. All right. Let me try to mute people that are not muted. There we go. All right. Okay. So now I've muted everyone. Okay. Feel free to unmute if you have a question, but it gets a little confusing. Okay. So theoretically, more in running than in walking, single leg stance is important. But it's really about how our center of gravity, okay, it's how our foot and our 3 planes are attaching to our front, our side, and our back body, okay? And then we want our center of gravity to be where our weight is situated, okay? And really it's below our belly button. It's a little bit more like our pelvic floor. All right, so in theory, okay, we want to see how well we can balance. Now, always have something nearby, and this is something that is a little bit more advanced in the walking system because this is more an element if you are a runner, okay? If you are a runner, you should be able to balance on one leg because running is a sequence of balancing on one leg and balancing on the other leg, okay? So if you have problems with your balance, what can you do to improve it, okay? Because we have the nerves on the bottom of the feet, okay, we're gonna take this little bumpy ball, okay? I am going to stimulate the nerves on the bottom of the foot, okay? My weight is in my left leg. I'm going to do it on my right. I'm doing light, I'm doing fast, and I'm doing a short duration, okay? Because I've done that, now my nerves are connecting better with my feet, with my brain, and my feet will feel the ground better, and I'm going to do a better job of balancing on one foot. If you have, everyone is going to benefit by stimulating the bottom of your feet ever so slightly and getting those nerves, feeling the ground better before you go for a walk. But when you're working on overall balance, to put yourself in the best position with your brain is to gently stimulate the bottom of the foot. So I used the bumpy ball. This right here is a Neboso. I don't know if you can see that it is ever so slightly bumpy, but this is also a mat that you could use that was designed for, it was designed to be able to feel the nerves best in the bottom of the foot. And they make insoles. They make a particular insole called a neuro insole for someone who has neurological deficits like Parkinson's or simply diabetes or MS and things like that. But theoretically, it would help almost all of us feel the ground better, because as soon as you turn about age 40, the nerves in the bottom of the feet start to decline a little bit. And those nerves are going to tell us where we are in space. And now that we're taking our bodies and our postures and adding movement into it, it's very good for us to be as stable as possible. Okay. So the other thing, in addition to having the bottom of the foot, when we think about how well we do in a single leg stance, okay, is because we need to have a mobile foot. We need to have an ankle that's able to dorsiflex and flex. Okay, we want our knees to stay in alignment, but a lot of times we need to make sure that our hips are strong enough to keep us in alignment. Okay, so one exercise that can be quite challenging actually, but really stabilizes, gets the hip to stabilize, is an exercise called the Stork Stand. And the Stork Stand is essentially, I'm going to be up against the wall. Let me just push this. So I'm going to be up against the wall. I'm going to have my hip over my ankle, and I'm going to get this leg in like that single leg stance. But as you can see, I'm now not having to hold it up with this leg. So I'm still balancing on this leg. I'm reminding my body how to be upright and stacked, okay? And I'm going to be asking this hip to do all the work of stabilizing on one side. My weight is in my standing leg, not in this leg, okay? And what's easy to do is shift off to the side, okay? I wanna make sure that I'm bloating over that hip, and you can just stand here for a minute. Now for myself, because I do 6 hours of massage a day, I will often do something else up here to kind of remind my upper back not to work. But this is a great exercise where you're asking your hip to stabilize. What it would look like on the other leg, okay, is I'm going to come up against the wall. My heel is to the wall. I'm going to take this leg out of it. I'm going to make sure that my toes are pointing forward, that my weight is over my hip, and I'm just going to stand here. And I'm going to be able to really isolate that my hip gets a little bit stronger. If you were to put things in a nutshell, a lot of times the hip is lacking a little bit of mobility, but it's also lacking the stability. A lot of times we'll use something else that allows us to sort of stabilize instead of the knee. Now, there's lots of exercises in more of an advanced balance stuff. Okay, so this is more advanced balance. But if we think the tripod of the foot, and then you think that we need to balance up over our body, there are lots of different exercises that are going to activate different glute muscles that would help with additional balance stuff. So always make sure that you are safe, okay? So this is if you have no problems balancing, if you can feel the bottom of the foot and or always have something nearby, okay? This is definitely, you first make sure you're safe, you first make sure that you are balanced, and then you can add different elements into the different planes. So our planes would be forwards, our planes would be to the side, and our planes would be to the back. Okay, so we're gonna feel the tripod on our foot. Okay, I have the 3 parts. I'm not too far out. I'm not too far collapsed in, okay? I'm gonna actually start with the bent knee, okay? And my weight is in this leg, okay? So I'm gonna press in and then I can stand up, okay? Now my center of gravity is really at my pelvic floor. It's below my belly button. So I'm gonna balance here, and or I'm gonna balance out here, or I'm going to balance back here. And the more that I can get like an active arms, the more that you're going to really get into your core. Okay. So one of these days I will do a walking class that goes into much more of a balance element of things. But that is one thing that is an advancement upon the single leg. Any questions on that before I go into gait of lower body and upper body? Okay, so the sequence of gait in the lower body, one of the biggest issues people have is that their big toe isn't as mobile as it should. And I know we discussed this last time, but it does make a really big difference. So when I'm talking about mobility of that big toe, let me just close the door real quick. Tori, I am teaching a class. I need you quiet. More quiet, okay? All right, sorry about that. Okay, so mobility of that toe, okay? So we're talking the big toe. We're really talking all the toes to be able to go back, but can that big toe move back and can press it forward, okay? So this is literally that the joint is allowing it to move, okay? Then there is the element of, do I have the muscle coordination to move that joint that already has the space to move? So can I lift my toes up? And can I press my toes down? So in gait of our lower body, okay, there's two elements of it. There's what's happening in the leg that's swinging forward, and there's what's happening in the leg that's swinging back. But of the leg that's swinging forward, okay, so now we have our center of gravity down by our pelvis. In general, everything is meant to be pushing forward, okay? But the leg that's swinging forward, it is needing that toe to be able to lift up, okay? It needs the toe to lift up, and the tissue, the plantar tissue on the bottom of the feet, is loading in anticipation for what it's expecting to feel on the way down, okay? This is where people who wear flip-flops, when you wear a flip-flop, your big toe is almost always pressing down. So theoretically, flip-flops or shoes that you always have to press down are going to get in the way of ideal walking, okay? You could have a very loose shoe that at least had something around the back of it, and you're not going to have as many issues. So in the lower body, we need to be able to have that toe that comes forward and lifts up. The tissue on the bottom of the feet is stretched. It's loading, it's anticipating the ground forces it needs to have for when you land it down, okay? So now this one's landing down, okay? And then it needs to roll through and press off the toe. The back leg, okay, is where the propulsion comes forward from. And ideally, we're going to press off with our glutes. What commonly happens, I know a lot of people were talking about bunions last time, okay? So a bunion has all different levels of sort of growth of it, right? But it starts where we had too much stimulation, particularly in gait, actually, at this big toe joint, below the big toe, but at this joint right here, okay? So then it got big, it got hard. And then what often happens is the toe goes this way, but what typically causes it is going to be that we walk a slightly different way. So let me try to show you how, if you have a bunion, you might be walking and how you could change that, okay? Again, if you have a bunion, you had many years of doing this, and it is not going to be easy to just change it, okay? But if instead of, in the back leg, pushing off from the glute, so the power of the propulsion comes from this back leg pushing us off and pushing us forward, okay? So that also requires that big toe to be able to push up like this, and then the propulsion to come from our glutes, okay? What often happens in a bunion is that we more come forward with our hip flexor, okay? We land, and either because we're not activating our glutes or because our big toe doesn't have enough movement in that joint, we are going to, instead of pushing off the toe like this, we're going to make kind of a, now, the movement looks like this, but my foot's not moving, my hips are moving, okay? So we make, instead of a propulsion like this, we're going like this. So it might look like this. Well, it's hard to show it. It's more like you're a skater, okay? You know how skaters push off to the side and they push off to the side? It looks more like this when you're running. Oh, when you're walking, only you are going forward. So if you have a bunion, okay, and there does get to be a point where the bunion is too developed to be able to, you can always improve things, but there's a certain part where you can really stop things in the track and fix it, okay? But the couple of things that you want to do with a bunion, okay, is to get the big toe to be as aligned as possible. If the big toe is already going this way, okay, you're probably going to need to put a spacer in there. You're going to need to make sure that the shoe you are wearing fits your entire toe box, including the spacer, trying to get your big toe into alignment, okay? You're going to want to work on short foot, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, okay? You're going to want to make sure that your glutes are activating and you have the ability to get that toe in dorsiflexion, okay? And that you're really propelling yourself forward using your glutes versus your hips. All of these things are much easier said than done, okay? Because you've been doing this ever since you were little, but taking some conscious time to make a little bit of effort to work on these things make a really big difference. Okay, so one of the biggest issues shows up that if you can't bend the toe properly. The other issue comes from that, are you using your hip flexors, okay? Are you more lifting your leg and dragging your leg forward and almost working like this, okay? Or are you being able to bend that toe and propel from the back by pushing that glute forward, okay? So in addition to how you're using your hips, okay, you can spend a little bit of time making sure that your toes are in alignment and looking to kind of almost emphasize, my toes are pointing forward, I'm going to squeeze my glute, squeeze my glute, squeeze my glute. And I'm going to kind of spend a little bit of time almost emphasizing these some of the times. And the more that you put the pieces together, the better likely you are going to start progressing into this as you are actually walking. Okay, so Katie's calf stretch, okay? So Katie's calf stretch is both a treatment and a test of how much space you have in your back line and how big a step you should take, okay? So a lot of people think that they should just take the biggest step that they possibly can, but the reality is that's great, but we should take the appropriate amount of step for the space that we have so we can use our toes properly, so we can be upright, so we can press from our glutes, okay? A lot of people, if they do not have enough space in their back line, which is really all the way from the bottom of the feet, all the way up the back, okay, is that they're going to bend at the hips, okay? They're going to be looking at the ground and they're going to be walking like this, okay? They're most likely going to be irritating their back. They're most likely going to be activating using their hip flexors. They're much more likely to eventually fall down onto the ground, okay? Safety first, everyone. If the ground is uneven, do look at the ground, okay? But we've had a whole another class where we talked about eyes. Okay, so I hadn't really written about the eyes in this class, but eyes are meant to be horizontal in space, which means that if we were upright and walking, our head would be upright like this, our eyes would be horizontal in space, that's where these are. Okay, but we get to look down, we get to roll our eye muscles down and look down at the ground, okay? If the ground is uneven and or we can't feel the ground appropriately, we absolutely need to look at what is coming up. But in the perfect world, okay, we're not going to have our center of gravity leaning over like this. We're going to be upright, feeling the bottom of the feet, okay, because we've been stimulating those nerves appropriately. Our body is upright, so we're not as likely to fall. And we're keeping our eyes horizontal in space, but looking down at the ground by rolling our eyes down, okay? There's a whole class on that one. Okay, but Katie's calf stretch. How big a step should you take? Now, when you want to add cardio into it, the faster you walk, the more cardio you're going to get. The more upright you are, and the more that you're engaging into your glutes, which are on your backside, your biggest muscle, the more cardio you're going to get. So a lot of people think, oh, well, if I lean over like this and I take a really, really big stride, I'm going to be more cardio in my workout, right? No, actually, the more that you're able to be upright and engage into your bigger muscles, the more cardio you're going to have. Now, Katie's calf stretch is a great way to test what your gait length should be. I'll answer that in a second. Okay, so if you have, actually, let me look into that real quick. All right, so someone asked, if you do have a bunion and the big toe is leaning towards the second toe, can adding a spacer between the big toe and the second toe really straighten the big toe? Is there a point that adding the spacer will not do anything to improve the bent big toe? Okay, so the spacer will always improve it, but it can't always fix all elements of it, okay? So in the perfect world, it's not just that we have the space there, okay? It's that our muscles, that the big toe is working properly. In order to have the big toe working properly, it has to be in alignment with this line right here, because the muscle itself mostly resides up into here, and then it's like long tendons. And you can only really access it if you are in alignment. So when the big toe goes like this, okay, you don't have much ability to actually activate short foot. And I think I forgot to do a whole section on short foot. So let me show you a little bit of what short foot is, okay? I'm going to try moving my computer here. Okay, so short foot, okay, is, watch what happens, okay, when I press this guy down. You're gonna see that the arch is forming right here, okay? So I'm pressing the toes down. It's a little bit easier actually if I'm up and over it. So right here, it's relatively flat, but now I'm gonna press in and the muscles are contracting. It's a small movement, but it's where that arch is activating, okay? We can only activate that muscle, which is an important muscle, if the toe is in alignment with that tendon that allows that toe to actually go. When you have a bunion, okay, you can't activate that short foot very easily, okay? So it's not necessarily about that we just created a spacer. It's about getting that toe to be able to press down, to be able to get that toe to be able to lift up using the muscles alone, okay? and create that muscle activity in the foot, okay? So it's not necessarily about the placement of the toe, it's about getting that movement to happen. And the movement is just not going to happen if the toe is coming right here, okay? Now, there gets to be a point where the bunion is so bad, and really what happens is it juts out very far this way, and it juts out very far this way. And then you create issues where you're getting friction, okay? And friction isn't helpful either. So you do always want to be able to have the space, but you really want to be able to have the space so that you can activate flexion and, or flexion and extension into the toe, and that you can activate the muscles in the foot to create short foot. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so now let's go into what our stride length should be. Katie's stretch. Love Katie's stretch. Okay, so this is both a test and a treatment. I have a half foam roller. You can see that it's flat on one side and rounded on the other. This is going to give me more of a stretch. You could do roll towels as well, okay? So I'm gonna come over to the side. Now, in proper alignment, we want our center of gravity to be over all of our main joints, with all of our main joints facing forward. So I'm going to want to make sure that my center of gravity is located over my ankle, okay? So I'm gonna come right here. My foot is on the half foam roller. I'm tight today, so we'll see what my stride length is, right? So I'm gonna come right here. I'm gonna make sure that my center of gravity is over my ankle, which you can't really see because it's the other side. And I'm gonna see how far forward I can bring this leg without, see how I'm losing my balance a little bit? That means I'm trying to go too far. I don't have that much space, okay? So I'm gonna bring my foot back. As I come right here, I'm having a little bit of trouble with my balance, okay? I'm bouncing a little bit because I don't really have the space, okay? Or I'm gonna wanna shift my hips forward. If I shift my hips forward, look at how much further I can go solidly, okay? But now I've shifted my center of gravity even above my toes, and that is not what we wanna do. We wanna have our center of gravity to go through our ankles. Our ankles are meant to load our plantar tissue, and our toes are not meant to load, okay? That's what happens. This is why people get plantar fasciitis and all sorts of nerve issues around the ball of the foot, is because they're spending too much time with their center of gravity over the front of the foot. So now I've got my center of gravity over my ankle. I'm seeing how far forward I can bring it over. And so right now, today, with where I am, this is my stride length. You can see that it's not a lot, right? It's not a lot. Now, if I spend some time and I stretch and I just breathe, and then I can ease it forward, and I allow this guy to stretch a little bit. And I can ease it a little forward. Now I'm bouncing a little bit, so I need to spend a little bit more time right here. So this is a great way for you to check in with what your stride length is, and also allow yourself to stretch, give it a little bit of time, move that foot forward, and now I know what my stride length should be. If I'm taking strides very fast, but more like this, I'm going to be able to be upright. I'm going to be able to activate by pressing off of my glute. I'm not going to be overstretching the bottom of the tissue. I'm not going to be loading the bottom of the tissue, because if I shifted my center of gravity instead of through my ankles, which are meant to load, in fact, it's healthy for our ankles to load. But if I'm to shift forward and now my center of gravity, my weight is loading my midfoot or my forefoot, okay? I have more space in that back line, but I am loading areas that aren't meant to load, okay? So in the perfect world, this is going to be a great way to increase that, the ability to take a longer stride, but it's also going to help me to bring a brain's awareness to how much space I have, how big a step I should be taking. Because if I only have this much space, and then I'm going to take big, long strides, okay, I'm going to do it by shifting my weight forward and overusing my back, or shifting my pelvis forward and loading the wrong pieces, okay? So if I were to do it from the other side, let me see if you guys can see it a little bit better this way. So I'm at the edge of the foam roll. They have them short, they have them wide, okay? Oh, this one feels good. This one's even tighter, I think. I'm gonna keep my center of gravity over my ankle, and I'm going to see how far forward I can bring this. And I'm going to, over time, if I gave it a little bit more time, I'd stretch a little bit more, and then I'd stretch a little bit more, and probably even with the space that I have, I'm probably not going to get more than this. But even right now, I'm bouncing a little bit. So I would need to stop, take a couple deep breaths, allow my calves to stretch, feel into what it was, and then do it. Now, this is a great way for brain's awareness, but sometimes if you just want to stretch the calf, a lot of times they have 12-inch ones, and most people could fit 12-inch ones with still having both feet on top of it. But you want your toes to be pointing forwards. You want, again, center of gravity over our ankles, and you can have a decent stretch into here, okay? If you want to add even more, you could add an element where you're reaching towards the ground. I'm quite tight today, so I'm not going very far because I have my feet up on this guy, and this really increases the length in the back line, okay? So I come right here, and you can see I can't reach the toes, but I don't know. Let's see if we were coming right here. You can see that I can reach much more towards my toes, but I'm stretching my calf at the same time. All right.
Rachel.
Okay.
Rachel,
Yes.
that stretch you just did with the half foam roller.
Yep.
Couldn't that be also achieved? You did in others if you stand at the edge of a step.
Yes.
And hold on to the railing and just sink your heels down that way.
Yes. So that is a great stretch for the calf, but it's not going to give you a brain's awareness of how big a step you should take. Does that make sense? The other thing that happens with that other one, okay, is now I'm barefoot. So I normally wear this in sneakers, okay? But here's stairs right here. What I think it was Joanne was talking about is that you're on a stair.
Yeah.
Now, normally you do this with sneakers, okay?
Yeah.
And I'm going to stretch right here. Different things happen. I don't have a ground that I'm hitting, okay? And what the other thing that happens is what my weight is going to shift a little bit from left to right, a little bit as I kind of unwind and add more of a stretch into that back line. So this is a great one to actually help unlevel hips, like lengthen the back line and unlevel your hips. But it's not, and it's going to stretch my back line, which is going to potentially give me more space into that, into taking a bigger stride. But it's not going to tell my brain how big a stride I should take. And you don't necessarily need to do that every day. It's just the number one thing that people come back from, and they've gone to the podiatrist. And it's even impressive that the podiatrists are saying this now, but they'll say, shorten your stride, shorten your stride, shorten your stride. Okay. It used to be they would say something else and they didn't really tell people what to do with it, but they're at least now saying shorten your stride. Okay. So what should your stride be shortened to? That's a great way. The half stretch is a great way to see what your stride should be. I have never done the Katie's calf stretch with the awareness of what your stride length should be and have someone not surprised at how short their stride length should be. Never, okay? So that other one though, the gravity drop they call, it's a little bit different. It's really great if someone's pelvis is a little bit off, okay? Like it's good for me. My pelvis, it's not looking too bad today, but you can see that this one is a little higher than that one. So that one's gonna help unwind me along the way, stretch my back line and unwind my pelvis a little bit. A different thing with this, right, is I have the ground. So on the step, I don't have something on the ground. So I can keep unwinding, keep unwinding. With this one, okay, there is a ground that I'm landing on. So there is, I'm not gonna, with sneakers on, you're probably not gonna overstretch on the gravity drop, okay? But at the same time, with this one, I have the ground. There's a limited amount of space. This is actually a pretty deep stretch. Once you have the half foam roller, if you use a roll towel, it's a little bit less, you know? So that's the difference between the two of those.
Okay, I can see that you can see the difference between the two because you've got the floor as your stable surface there to lengthen.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I would also say you don't necessarily have to do that one all the time. It's just good to have your brain's awareness. But one thing I am happy to say is podiatrists used to just come back and say, oh, well, you have a bunion, or you have, a neuroma. And a lot of times, but what causes them? Why do you have it? And what do you need to do to stop it? Because that's really what's important, right? If you already have it, you can improve things, but you're not going to make something that's damaged or irritated go away. But a lot of times, like, people will have a neuroma and it'll either be here or here, okay? But what's happening there? What's happening there is in gait, right? And this is complicated parts of gait that I hadn't really gone through, but you have your tripod, right? You have your 3 parts, and you're supposed to land on the heel. Some people don't, they land up here, but you're supposed to land on the heel, and then you're supposed to have your foot land like this. But for the most part, you land here, then you land here, and then your foot rolls, and then you press off. Now, what gets complicated with that is you are entirely landing on the whole thing. It's just slightly more weight is supposed to land here. There's supposed to be a slight roll, which is about pronation, supination, and then you press off. And you don't just press off with the big toe, you press off with all the guys. That's why it gets complicated when I talk about the different elements of things. But a lot of times, either with a bunion or simply if you are not really pressing off with the big toe, you will press off with too much weight into like these toes, okay? And that's where there's some nerves that go through here, and then they create like calluses and irritations in there, which is what creates these.
What I got.
So that is what happens with that. It looks like, and this is really complicated. And the tricky thing with this is you really land on your heels, and you are pressing down, and then you're pressing off. That is what it looks like. But there is an element when we talk about supination and pronation, okay? There is an element where you land, you're pressing your foot down, but more weight is to the outside, and then more weight presses to the inside, and then you press off. I mean, that is like absolutely ideal gait. But the reality is it's more than what people really need to think about. They need to be able to have the mobility into the ankle, the ability to have the short foot, the ability to press off the toe, and most of that will happen appropriately if you're able to do that. Okay, sequence of gait for the upper body. I see most of people's dysfunctions when I look at their upper body. So why is what our upper body does so important with gait? It is because center of gravity is here, down at our pelvis, okay? But now our weight is shifting from, it's shifting and it's moving over these different areas as our feet go. To balance out so that we don't fall, okay, or as our center of gravity is shifting, it is helpful to have our upper bodies go opposite. So we tend to have this element where, right, our left leg is going forward, our right leg is going forward, okay? Now, people will have shoulder injuries, people will have other things, and that will affect it. But a lot of times, I'm able to see where people's dysfunctions are below because I look at what happens to their legs. So some people have one leg that goes forward, and then the other one that just comes up to midline. And then they go one leg forward, and they go up to midline. And one leg forward and go up to midline, okay? And what you would see that as is that my left arm is going forward and my right arm is not, okay? Like this. So that is one way that you can see what you're doing. What can help that a little bit is, first of all, recognizing it. Oh, look, my left arm does this. What is my lower leg doing? Okay, in theory, we want to be equal in hip flexion and hip extension on both sides. One way that we can work on it, okay, I put a link to an original strength upper body marching, okay? It's a really great way to kind of lubricate the joints a little bit, get coordination a little bit better, because there is a level of coordination with this. That coordination is part of the brain, is part of a very basic movement that we had with crawling when we were young, okay? But we're now crawling, standing up. And one other thing before I show you what the marching looks like. When you're going on level ground, our arms do help us, our arms help us propel as well, okay? But when we are on level ground, it's the backswing that is helping us propel forward, okay? So it's the back part that's helping us propel forward. If we were on a steep incline, like a client just recently had gone to San Francisco, and of course it was much hillier, okay? And a much hillier, we're moving our arms forward, are helping propel us forward. So we do want to have an element where our arms are going forward and our arms are going back, but a really great way is marching. So it's just lifting the legs and getting a coordinated movement. And one of the things that we want to have is generally everything facing forward, but that our arms are going forward and back. Like for me, I can see that I want to go forward, and it's a little trickier. I have to think about my right arm coming back. And it's just this marching. So there's an element where we're going opposite arms and legs. It can be playful. You can swing like this, but the most part, they have it bent because we want movement right here. And it can be a great way to, then when you add movement into it, think about being upright, adding this thing, and then pressing off with that glute. So I'm pressing off and I'm like propelling myself off with that, squeezing my glute muscles. And that can be a really great way to put a little bit of time into improving being upright, into improving different activities that are going to transfer into our gait. All right. All right, so I'm going to go into adding different elements. Okay, so once we are used to improving our gait, okay, sometimes we're on uneven ground and sometimes we have to lift over things, okay? So every once in a while, it's good when we're at home and we're safe to practice like stepping over things or stepping to the side, you know? Someone has a baby gait and they have to step over and things like this. It's really good for us when we're in a safe environment to be able to practice different movements that we might have, so that if we were, sorry, I was reading the comments, so that you can practice little things. The other things is sometimes
Good, how are you? What?
less stable environments. Okay?
Well, thank you. I know, yeah. No, it did feel strange to be gone that long.
I know.
It always does. Please,
Okay, can we mute everyone, please?
part of.
Can everyone please mute? Thank you.
All right. What is what?
Denise, you need to mute.
Okay, so this is a very squishy, okay? This would be a very unstable ground, because not only am I a couple inches up, oh, you can't see this, but it's squishy. So now it's not a stable ground, okay? So this would be a great way to work on balancing, okay? So this is going to ask my neurological system to, especially, now I would not recommend going to a squishy thing like this right away, okay? Not on like a balance beam. This also is squishy, okay? It's not even quite as squishy as that is. And this though, once I was really good at balance, once I was really good at propelling forward, but I wanted to make it more challenging, change the surface. Okay, so now this is a squishy one, okay? So I can just balance with both. I'm good. Have something nearby if you need to, but I'm gonna add, now this is easier than trying to walk on the balance beam, but it's a similar surface, okay? So now, in a way, I'm relatively safe, okay? But I'm gonna add this uneven surface, and it's going to make my body my motor muscles to have to catch up with which way my brain is going, okay? And very, very advanced, okay? And make sure you weren't doing this alone, but if you were good for single leg stance, and you were good on uneven ground, and you were good on uneven surfaces, is to close your eyes. And I would start even to close your eyes when you were just standing like this, and stand and see how things are. But one of our biggest compensators are our eyes. So our eyes really tell us also where we are in space. We feel where we are in space with the bottom of the feet, but our eyes tell us where we are in space, okay? So even watch, let's see how I do. But now I'm closing my eyes. This is not bad. I'm closing my eyes, but you can add an element and you can see how much your eyes are working for you. It's great that our eyes are working for us, but typically as we age, our eyes go downhill a little bit and our feet, nerves go downhill. So it's really great to safely practice some of these things to improve our neurological system, okay? So there is a Zen toes, can often be a good spacer between the two. There is, I love correct toes, but correct toes don't work for many people. But there is a, Zen, Z-E-N. They're about like $5.99, maybe $10 at Amazon. They go in between here, they wrap around the second toe and they create a little bit of a spacer. In the perfect world, there's space between all the toes. I really like correct toes. Correct toes have a lot of great little videos. Let me write that down actually. I'm probably going to be selling correct toes. I do have the Zen toes. Like when my clients come in and we're looking at their issues, I will often be like, let's try this, let's try that, you know? But for the most part, what we want is not only for the proper alignment, but then also that our shoes fit. So almost everyone Whereas a shoe that's a little bit too narrow for them. You know, they put in the shoe and the shoe fits a particular way. But if you take the insole out and you stand on the insole and now the weight is over the foot and you see the foot splayed out, you should fit entirely on your insole if your shoe is fitting. When you have a toe that's in here, okay, it's going to be more narrow. If you then put that spacer, you also need to make sure that your foot fits appropriately into your shoes. Correct toes are something that they spread all the toes, and you often need a particular type of shoe to fit it. It can be great, but with a lot of people, it's sort of this complicated balance where you want to improve the bottom of the foot, you want to improve the alignment, you want to improve. A lot of shoes also have, we have this rocker movement of the foot that, you know, the heel to press off the toe. And they were like, oh, feet are supposed to be, you know, having this rocker movement. So people have put us in shoes that have a heel lift and they have a toe lift. And what ends up happening, okay, is that the tissue under here is stretched all the time and isn't used a lot. And one thing that happens is, well, there's all sorts of issues that happen with it. We're better in a zero drop, but if we switch too quickly, it changes everything above us. So the reality is we want to kind of slowly make lots of different changes and find out what works best for you. And safety first all the time. Any more questions?
Does that correct toes or the Zen toe help to actually, with all the space between all of it, it'd be more the correct toe one?
Yeah, the correct toes are the space between all of them. They have great videos. Even for myself, like I have found a sneaker that works well for me, that allows me to really spread all my toes. But even when I put correct toes in, it's a little tight in my sneaker, just at the very top. And it's not bad. Like I was like, oh, my shoes are great. I have lots of space for my toe box. But it's still a little, it's, you know, correct toes really do widen your feet. Now, there's treatment and then there's walking. One of the things with putting in these spacers and then walking, okay, we're adding movement. We are going to shift how we place our weight. So as soon as you place either the spacer between the big toe, which tends to be the most important one, right? And or the space between all of them. One thing that you're most likely going to do, okay, is most of us put too much weight in this line. There's like 3 lines in the feet. We put too much weight into this line. We don't put enough weight into this line, and we don't put enough weight into this line. Or we put too much weight into this line, but then we shift into this line. So you will most likely start activating things that you hadn't activated before. And you can, you know, your hip might get uncomfortable, or you're going to start walking and start feeling your glutes. You know, you used to go for a walk and you never felt your glutes, and then you start shifting what muscles you use, and you're going to start feeling different muscles. That's not necessarily bad, but with all of these things, it's almost better to, you know, it took many years to get to the point where you are now. I would ease into them and be just curious about the changes that your body is feeling, always making sure that safety first.
Thank you so much. That's great.
Yeah. All right. I felt like there was one other thing I was going to say. Correct Toes has some really great short videos on why you have a hammer toe, why you have, you know, all these different things that are really great. I like Correct Toes for that. Oh, I was going to show you one more thing. So I've showed you this before. So there's when you add a bunion spacer, or you add one of those things, and then you're walking, you're going to be shifting your really your gait, okay? But you can also just stick your toes in between, or you can get something like a yoga toe. Like a yoga toe is it's really going to stretch you. You're not really going to walk in it, okay? So in retrospect, if you can touch your toes, I would recommend just sticking your fingers between them. So my fingers are between all of my toes, okay? I'm going to get a stretch into my hips, And so I could just stretch here, and I'm going to stretch my toes apart. I'm going to take all of this tissue that has been too, compressed in shoes, and I'm going to ask that tissue to stretch. I'm just stretching that tissue, but then you could make circles. Now I'm going to work on mobility. So really, like, I love doing more than one thing at the same time. Here's a great exercise where I'm stretching into the hip, I'm stretching my feet, and I'm working all the muscles in the lower leg while also stretching those feet apart. So there's lots of different ways of doing it, but I really like the correct toes are great. Most people would do better off with the Zen spacer initially, and perhaps observing correct toes, and that would be probably a more advanced change. Any more questions?
That's awesome. You did good with the toes. Wow, that's very good to know. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people's issues for a really long time were primarily their feet. Now they're not so much, but again, sort of over the pandemic, everyone's issues became, the weight of the world on their shoulders, really, really tight upper traps. But lately I'm starting to see, as people are trying to get out and about and walk more, I'm starting to see more people with some foot issues again. So
But you say a bunion. You said a bunion. You said it was a muscle, but I thought it was the bone growing out.
So a bunion is going to be where the joint
Yeah.
got like swollen, and then it sort of became like a bone. Okay. Once it's truly a bone and it becomes like a bone and becomes displaced, it gets very hard to correct it. Okay. But what it starts because you're using your muscles incorrectly, and to stop it in its tracks if it's not too late. Okay. You do need to be able to activate that short foot, that arch that's lifting in the foot. You need to be able to press the toes down. The toe needs to be in alignment for that, and you need to be able to activate short foot, which is that you can activate your arch. It's a small movement, and your foot's likely to cramp if you've not used it very much. The cramping isn't bad. It's like the foot actually coming back to life, like sort of dying tissue coming back. But yeah.
Okay.
All right.